We'll discuss removing and replacing the spark plugs on basically a 9th gen 2.4 liter Honda Accord. This is a 2014. Spark plugs recommended are NGK, laser iridium. These were about 23 bucks a piece. Glad I only needed 4 of them, and also glad I only replaced them every 100,000 miles. So to remove this, to get to the spark plugs, essentially you have to pull the coil packs. To pull the coil packs, you got to take the cover off. So we have a pair of 10 millimeter bolts. Hold this plastic cover on. Once that's off, we'll have bolts for the coil packs, and then we'll pull the coil packs out, use our wrench or a socket for spark plugs, pull our spark plugs out, inspect them, take a look at them, keep track of which cylinder is which, mark them. I typically save them, put them in a box, put them on a shelf, so I at least have a record of how each of my cylinders are behaving over time. Now, I did point out 2, but there are 5. So you got 5 of these odd-shaped bolts. They're 10 millimeter, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now once you do that, this cover comes off. Set out of the way, and then you can see you have your four coil packs. Now hopefully we can pull this bolt out and work the coil pack past. First thing we're going to have to do is work each of these plugs off so we can safely pull that off. And this looks like it's clipped on here, and it's clipped on back there, so this whole wire rail might actually flop out of the way to help us out. We'll take a look. So by pulling this back, that pops loose, that pops loose. Reach your hand in, push down. You'll actually hear it pop. Make sure you get that clip fully depressed before you pull on it. At that point, this will slide right out of the way. Now we have the easy job of just simply removing the coil packs. As you pull each of these out, after you've loosened this bolt completely, give that a slight twist. It'll slide out. We'll show you what to look for later. Take your 14 millimeter socket, stick it down in the hole. Carefully, don't put a lot of torque on it, loosen it up. I have a pretty long extension on this, so then that way I can actually safely hold it here to try and prevent any moment from one to twist or break off the spark plug. So now that we've gone through the effort of taking the plugs and the coil packs out, we'll want to lay them out. We want to inspect each of them, but remember, keep them in order. You want to put them all back in the exact same order. While the coil packs can, in theory, be swapped around and not have any adverse effects, over the life of the vehicle, we want to keep track of what we're doing. As I mentioned before, I like to label all of my spark plug boxes, so that way the old plugs go back in a box. They'll get put in that box, dated on a shelf, so I'll know the mileage and the year that I replaced them. Kind of helps me diagnose later on in the future. It'll also let me know sometimes you might have a plug that's darker or more discolored than another one. And we can see I got a little bit of more material residue on this coil and on this on these threads, more than I do the other ones, which tells me I probably need to take a look down in the cylinder well, or at least down through the hole and see what's going on. Maybe it's just some leftover RTV red or some sort of a coolant gasket. Typically your coolant gasket materials are more red in color and your oil gasket materials are more black in color, but I'll have to take a look and see what's going on there. For the most part, the car is running fine. We're at 108,000 miles on it. It's the first time the plugs have been changed. I'm the original owner since the car was brand new. So I know no one's touched them. We can tell that we got some age on these spark plugs. You can tell that they have discolored a little bit from heating over time. Most of the mileage, it's 2014 car, it's 2018 now. So I'm coming up on 4 years and 108,000 miles. I'm averaging roughly 25 to 30,000 miles a year, mostly all highway. But we can see we're getting some discoloration on the porcelain, some burning down here. So this is probably starting to break down a little bit. Anytime you see something like that, it tells you you're losing some power. So, lose fuel economy over time, lose a little bit of power over time. You start seeing some engine running a little bit different. So these spark plugs can make a huge difference. There's a PZEV, so partial zero emissions vehicle, or non. The difference is the dual electrodes. So the ground pin here has an additional electrode on it. You can see both the original one and the new one is. Now there's with and without models. Now typically your California models, your emissions checked ones are going to need to use this spark plug. The other 49 states can get away with the other one. It's a little bit cheaper. These are about 23 bucks a piece. The other ones are about 15 bucks a piece. As I mentioned before, they're the NGK iridiums. NGK is what, this is actually a Denso from the factory. You can go Denso, you can go NGK. For the most part, I've always ran NGK plugs in my vehicles. So I'm going to stick with this one. Happy with that plug. choice, and I'll let it pull the other one out and I take a look how it's built. It's kind of hard to tell if you got a PZEV model or not, because you got to look at the engine code and you got to do some back research. It's not really painfully obvious, but pulling the plugs, I can see how it was built. I've been getting fantastic fuel economy in this car, so I'm going to stick with better plugs. So I'm going to take a look in that cylinder well and see what's going on, but for the most part, if you don't have anything that looks odd, you can just go ahead and put them all back in order, put your plugs away, and good to go. And one final tip, if you're going to reinstall your spark plugs, putting a little bit of anti-seize. You can get these packaged when you buy your spark plugs. Putting a little bit of those on the threads of the new one has an opportunity to try and help it from getting stuck. I also took some long, non-frizzy Q-tips, a little bit of brake clean, and clean down at the mating surface, so where this gasket or this washer goes, so then that way I have a little bit better mating surface, because you'll get a little bit of debris when you pull that out just from over the years. So clean it out, make sure it's as clean as it can possibly get it. It should be good to go. So now that you've actually gone through, removed everything, you can take time to take a look down on all your cylinder walls. This is the one you can see there's a little bit of red residue at the top. That's my cylinder number 3. Looks like that was actually near the top, so it might have been during assembly. I don't have any oil built up in any of them. For the most part, they all look pretty clean. And that's good. That's exactly what you want to see. So I think at this point, I am ready to reassemble, put all the plugs in, and good to go. Now, because you may not have one of the special spark plug, the 14mm spark plug that has the rubber boot, you might be wondering, how do I get the spark plug back in the hole without just dropping it in there and damaging the electrode? So one trick you can do is you can actually use the coil pack. It'll grip the spark plug. You'll feel it go down in there, and position it so you can just kind of start to give it a turn. You'll just barely engage the threads, pull that out. Then you can go back in with your socket, carefully engage the spark plug, and then you can go ahead and just work it all the way to the bottom. And then, of course, after you've gone through and done that process for each of the 4, and you've gotten them kind of finger tight, then you go back through and torque them to spec. So now you're done. You've put anti-seize on your spark plugs, and put them back in order. Put your coil backs in the same order. You labeled all your spark plugs. It's 13 foot-pounds is the torque for all of your spark plugs. And basically, to get you a kind of feel there, it's finger tight, and then you're going to go about a quarter to half turn more. Don't put a lot of force into it. 13 foot-pounds is not much. And then once you get your coil packs back in, plug all these back in. Make sure, there's only one place to put them. Just obviously don't be silly about it, but then you're good to go. Put your cover back on. Cinch that back down. And of course, while you're here, take time to take a look at anything else you need to in the engine. 100,000 miles is a decent amount of time, so inspect your belt. This belt's at 100,000. It is original. It's not cracked, but you're starting to ask a lot of a belt. And if you spend a lot of time on the highway like I do, you kind of start doing preventive maintenance. Coolant, obviously, you're going to go through. Brake fluid, I'll flush that out. Those are both Honda fluids. I can throw a photo in that kind of shows you what the Honda spec is for all those fluids. But 108,000 miles, car's been pretty decent. Got some other repairs that I've done along the way, but from an engine standpoint, it's been kicking butt. Thanks. If you've got any questions, let me know.